The smell of roasting turkey and spiced pine should have felt like coming home. It used to, but standing in the arched doorway of my family's dining room, all I felt was the familiar chill of being an outsider. The entire Baxter family, my family, was seated around the long mahogany table. The candlelight from the elaborate centerpiece flickered off their designer plates, their wine glasses, their perfectly polished smiles. They were all laughing at something my father had said. A loud, forced sound that didn't quite reach their eyes. My cousin Delaney was seated at the head of the table, right next to my mother. She was in the seat that used to be mine, my place. She'd always been the golden child, the one they compared me to, the one I could never measure up to. Now, she was literally in my spot, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo, a smug little twist to her lips that she probably thought looked charming. No one looked at me, hovering by the door. It was as if I was a ghost, a piece of furniture they had learned to navigate around. My name hadn't been mentioned once since I'd arrived an hour ago. My father, Everett Baxter, a man who lived his life through the reflection of his family's success, stood up, raising his glass. His voice boomed through the room. A toast to family, and to our brilliant Delaney, who's just made partner at the firm. We are so proud. A chorus of "to Delaney" echoed around the table. Glasses clinked. My mother Marilyn beamed, her eyes crinkling in a way they never did when she looked at me. My sister Perrin, sitting next to her husband, raised her glass with a little too much enthusiasm, her eyes darting over to me for a split second, a flicker of something pity, triumph, before she looked away. The humiliation was a thick, syrupy thing, coating the back of my throat. It wasn't just the toast, it was the knowledge that my old bedroom, the one with the slanted ceiling I used to trace with my finger as a child, was now Delaney's for the holidays. "We just had to make space, darling," my mother had said on the phone, her voice breezy and unapologetic. "Delaney needs a proper office space to work while she's here. You don't mind the guest room in the basement, do you?" I minded. I minded so much it felt like a physical ache in my chest. They hadn't even asked. They had told me. Perrin finally acknowledged my presence, her voice as sweet and cloying as burnt sugar. "Do you need a seat, Sorrel? Maybe the kitchen has a stool or something." The laughter that followed was quiet, but it cut deeper than any shout. They found my displacement amusing, a little Christmas joke at the expense of the family failure. For years, that's what I was. Sorrel, the artsy one. Sorrel, with her useless degree in textile design. Sorrel, who was going nowhere. I had swallowed the hurt, the casual dismissals, the constant draining feeling of being a disappointment. But tonight was different. Something inside me had finally clicked into place. A piece of steel I didn't know I possessed. I let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. It felt foreign and powerful. "No thanks, Perrin," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through their fading chuckles. "I've already got dinner waiting." I turned, my back straight, and walked out of the dining room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The silence I left behind was louder than any sound I could have made. I walked through the familiar foyer, past the grand staircase I used to slide down as a girl, out on the circular driveway, frosted with a light dusting of snow. A black Escalade was idling, its engine a low, powerful hum. My driver, Theo, a quiet man with kind eyes, saw me and immediately stepped out, holding the heavy rear door open. The cold air felt clean, washing away the cloying warmth of the house. I slid onto the plush leather seat, the scent of genuine leather and subtle air freshener filling my senses. It was the scent of my world, the one I had built for myself in the shadows of their disapproval. Theo closed the door, sealing me inside my silent, peaceful bubble. He got back into the driver's seat and looked at me in the rearview mirror. His expression was neutral, but I saw the question in his eyes. I took a deep breath and said the two words that changed everything. "Take me home." He nodded, putting the car into drive. The magnificent overlit house, the house I grew up in, receded in the rearview mirror. But we weren't heading to the cramped, lonely apartment they all assumed I still lived in. We were headed to my penthouse suite, overlooking the entire city. I was the joke of this family for 27 years. the quiet, artistic failure they kept in the basement. What they didn't know was that while they were mocking me, I was building an empire in silence, and tonight, I wasn't just walking away from them, I was about to own the very ground they were celebrating on. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be a quiet, legal, and absolute transfer of power. And it all started 2 years ago, in the very place they had relegated me to. Rock bottom. 2 years earlier felt like a different lifetime, lived by a different person. I had just returned home from college, my diploma in textile design clutched in my hand like a shield that offered zero protection. It was supposed to be a triumphant return, the start of my adult life. Instead, it was the beginning of my descent. The family home, which I had once remembered with a soft focus fondness, now felt like a cage where I was the main exhibit in a zoo of disappointment. My bedroom, the one with the window that overlooked the old oak tree, was now a home gym my father used twice a month. My things had been unceremoniously packed into boxes and moved to the basement. It's just more practical, Sorrel, my mother, Marilyn, had explained, not looking up from her magazine. You're home now, you can help out around the house. Consider it your rent. The basement wasn't a cozy finished space, it was a concrete-walled cavern, smelling perpetually of damp earth and mothballs. A single bare bulb hung from a wire, casting long, menacing shadows. My bed was a lumpy mattress on a metal frame, pushed against a wall that sometimes wept condensation. This was my place in the family hierarchy. Below ground, every dinner was an interrogation. I'd sit at the corner of the table, feeling smaller with every passing moment, as my father Everett would ask about my job search. "Any leads today, Sorrel? Anything at all?" he'd ask, his tone implying the answer was already a foregone conclusion. "I had an interview with a textile company," I'd say, trying to keep my voice bright. "It went well, I think." My mother would scoff, a delicate, dismissive sound she had perfected over the years. "A textile company? Darling, what does one even do there? Fold things?" She'd turn to my sister, Perrin. "Perrin's friend's daughter just got a job at a marketing firm. Now that's a real career." "It's a design position, Mom," I'd try to explain, "for patterns on fabrics." She'd wave a dismissive hand, her diamond rings catching the light. "You're a walking art project, Sorrel. It's charming in a way, but not practical. No real man wants a woman without ambition." That line was her favorite. She wielded it like a weapon, a sharp, precise jab meant to undermine my very sense of self-worth. Ambition, in her world, meant law, finance, or marrying into it. It didn't mean creating something beautiful with your own two hands. I was treated like a servant. "Sorrel, since you're not busy, could you clear the table?" "Sorrel, the dishwasher needs emptying." "Sorrel, could you run to the store? Your father needs his specific brand of coffee." I did it all with a clenched jaw and a burning in my stomach, because what else could I do? I had no money, no job, and nowhere else to go. The rejections piled up. I sent my resume out to 17 different companies. 17 polite, soul-crushing emails came back. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely matches our needs." Each one felt like a confirmation of my family's verdict. I was useless. I was not needed. In a desperate attempt to feel productive, I tried to sell my art online. I spent days photographing my intricate textile pieces, my sketches, my watercolor designs. I built a small, simple website. It got 3 visitors in a month, 2 of which were me checking to see if it was working. The silence of the internet was almost as deafening as the criticism at home. The lowest point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had spent my last $30 on high-quality cardstock and printing. I designed my own business cards. They were simple but elegant, with a small embossed design of a needle and thread in the corner. "Sorrel Baxter," they read. "Textile and pattern design." I was planning to go to local boutiques, to craft fairs, anywhere I could, just to hand them out. I was sitting at the kitchen island, carefully separating the stack of fresh cards, when Perrin walked in. She picked one up, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, how cute," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Are you opening an Etsy shop? I'm trying to find freelance work, I mumbled, my face flushing with heat. She let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh, not overtly. It was worse. It was a laugh of pity, of amusement at my sad, pathetic little effort. Oh, Sorrel, that's adorable. You and your little projects. She tossed the card back on the counter, as if it were contaminated, and walked away, still chuckling to herself. I sat there for a long time, staring at the stack of cards. Each one felt like a tiny monument to my failure. Her laughter echoed in the cavernous, empty kitchen. Adorable. A little project. That's all I was. I gathered the cards, my hands shaking, and retreated to my basement dungeon. I shoved the box of cards into a drawer and lay on the lumpy mattress, staring up at the exposed pipes and cobwebs. The tears I had been holding back for weeks finally came, hot and silent in the damp, cold air. This was it. This was rock bottom. A place where even your own sister's pity felt like a slap in the face. It was a feeling of such profound hopelessness that I thought it might swallow me whole. But in that darkness, a tiny, unfamiliar spark ignited. It wasn't hope. It was anger. And I decided, right then and there, that I would rather burn out trying than let them be right about me. The open house was my mother's idea of a productive outing for me. You need to get out, Sorrel, she'd said, her tone suggesting it was a charitable act. And for heaven's sake, try to network. You never know who you might meet. The house was a sterile, modern monstrosity of glass and white walls, filled with people making polite, empty conversation. I felt like a ghost, drifting through rooms that had been staged to within an inch of their life, all personality vacuumed out. My mother was off charming a real estate agent, leaving me to my own devices. To combat the crushing boredom and social anxiety, I found a quiet corner in the great room, picked up a stack of thick linen-like cocktail napkins from a tray, and pulled a fine-tipped pen from my purse. It was a nervous habit, something I'd done since I was a child. When I was overwhelmed, I drew. I wasn't thinking, just letting my hand move. Intricate patterns began to bloom across the small paper squares. A swirling Art Deco fan on one, a dense botanical filigree on another, a sharp geometric honeycomb on a third. I was so lost in my little world of ink that I didn't notice the man standing nearby, watching me. When he spoke, his voice was a low, calm baritone that cut through the shrill chatter of the room. That's a rather inventive use for a napkin. I looked up, startled. He was in his late 60s, I guessed, dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit that made everyone else in the room look like they were wearing costumes. His hair was silver, and his eyes were a sharp, intelligent blue. But what I noticed most was his tie. It was silk, the color of midnight, and embroidered with a single, elegant raven in flight. It was a piece of art in itself. I flushed, suddenly embarrassed, and started to gather the napkins. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just passing the time. Don't apologize for having a talent, he said, his eyes fixed on the designs. He picked one up, the one with the botanical pattern. He studied it for a moment, turning it over in his long, graceful fingers. This has movement, it has a point of view. Most professional designers I hire can't manage that. My heart gave a hopeful little flutter. I studied textile design. I can see that, he said with a small smile. He held out his hand. Jasper Reinhardt. The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. Jasper Reinhardt. He wasn't just some wealthy guest, he was an interior architecture tycoon. His firm designed luxury hotels and private residences all over the world. He was a legend. I had studied his work in college. I'm Sorrel Baxter, I managed, my voice a little shaky as I shook his hand. Sorrel, he repeated, testing the name. He looked from the napkin back to my face, his gaze thoughtful. I have a problem, Sorrel Baxter. I have a guest bedroom in my city apartment that is aggressively beige. My usual designers keep showing me mood boards they pulled straight from Pinterest. It's uninspired. I want something different. He paused, his blue eyes locking onto mine. I want you to redesign it for me. Just a proposal. But there's one condition. No Pinterest. No design magazines. I want to see what's in your head, not what you think I want to see. I want raw ideas. I was stunned into silence. It felt like a test, a trick. Me? But I don't have a portfolio, a website. You have this, he said, tapping the napkin. And you have a pen. That's all a real designer needs to start. Bring me a concept, a sketch, a model, whatever you want. You have 48 hours. The next 2 days were a blur of frenetic, terrifying, exhilarating energy. I didn't sleep. I lived on coffee and the adrenaline of a single impossible chance. I couldn't afford fancy software or rendering programs, so I went back to basics. I went to the basement and dug through the boxes of my old life. I found scraps of fabric, pieces of cardboard, old jewelry, colored paper, wire. My hands remembered the joy of making something from nothing. I built a miniature model of the room inside a shoebox. I painted the walls a deep, moody teal. I fashioned a tiny headboard from a piece of hammered tin. I created a rug pattern using crushed dried leaves glued to paper. I designed a custom light fixture from twisted wire and beads. It was raw. It was strange. It was 100% me. 48 hours later, I was standing outside his office, the shoebox clutched in my trembling hands, convinced I was about to make a fool of myself. He led me into a vast, sunlit room with a single massive oak desk. I placed the box on the desk and opened it. He didn't speak for a full minute, just peered into my miniature world. He gently touched the tiny wire chandelier with the tip of his finger. He traced the pattern on the miniature rug. A slow smile spread across his face. "Remarkable," he said, finally looking up at me. "You listened, and you created." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming. "You've got raw talent, Sorrel, the kind that can't be taught. But talent without discipline is just a hobby." He steepled his fingers. "If you're willing to work, truly work, harder than you've ever worked before, I'll fund the first step of your business. This is not charity," he said, his voice firm. "It's an investment. I'm betting on you. Don't make me regret it." A week after Jasper Reinhardt had turned my world upside down with his offer, he called me. "Be at the Monarch Hotel, Boardroom C, tomorrow at 10 a.m., he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You have a meeting." "A meeting? With who?" I asked, my stomach instantly tying itself into a knot of pure panic. "A potential client," he said. "The hotel's owner. He's considering a redesign for his boutique chain." I told him I knew a promising new designer. I nearly dropped the phone. "Jasper, I can't. I'm not ready. I don't have anything. I don't have a website, a brand, a business license. I don't even have a PowerPoint presentation." The words came tumbling out in a rush of terror. I was still operating out of my basement, my business consisting of a shoebox model and a single napkin. "You have your sketchbook," he replied calmly, "and you have your ideas. The rest is just noise. Wear something professional. Be there at 10. He hung up. The next 24 hours were a special kind of hell. I stared at my closet, a collection of worn jeans and art-smudged t-shirts, and felt a wave of despair. I ended up borrowing a black blazer from Perrin's closet, without asking. A blazer that was a little too tight in the shoulders, and smelled faintly of her expensive, cloying perfume. It felt like I was wearing a costume, playing the part of someone I wasn't. I spent the entire night sketching, my hands flying across the pages of my notebook. Ideas for lobby seating, for room textures, for lighting that felt warm and inviting instead of corporate and cold. I didn't have slick, computer-generated mock-ups. All I had were my hand-drawn visions, annotated with frantic, scribbled notes. The next morning, I walked into the Monarch Hotel feeling like a complete imposter. The lobby was all marble and hushed tones. The boardroom was intimidating, with a long, polished table that reflected my pale, terrified face back at me. The hotel owner, a man named Mr. Davies, was impeccably dressed and had a look of bored impatience. Jasper was there, sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, an unreadable expression on his face. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. I started to speak, and my voice came out as a reedy squeak. Hello. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm Sorrel Baxter." I had prepared a little speech in my head, but the words evaporated the moment I opened my mouth. I started to talk about brand synergy and customer experience, using buzzwords I'd Googled the night before. I could see Mr. Davis's eyes glazing over. He glanced at his watch. My heart was pounding in my ears. I was fumbling. I was failing. The blazer felt like a straitjacket. In a moment of sheer blind panic, I stopped talking. I just stopped. The silence in the room was horrifying. I could feel Jasper's eyes on me from the corner. This was it. The end of my one chance. Then, I remembered what he said. "You have your sketchbook." I took a deep breath, threw my useless memorized speech out the window, and opened the worn, dog-eared sketchbook on the table. "Look," I said, my voice suddenly finding its footing. "Forget the corporate speak. Here, this is what I see." I turned the book around and pushed it across the table toward Mr. Davis. I started talking, but this time, it was different. I talked about the feel of a certain fabric on a headboard. I described how a particular shade of blue could make a small room feel infinite. I explained how a pattern, repeated from the carpet to the curtains to the lampshades, could create a sense of cohesive calm. My hands moved over the drawings, pointing out details, my passion finally overriding my fear. Mr. Davis leaned forward, his boredom replaced by a flicker of genuine interest. He picked up the sketchbook and started flipping through the pages slowly. He stopped on a drawing of a custom-designed welcome desk for a lobby. "This," he said, tapping the paper. "This is interesting. It's different." He looked up at me, really looked at me for the first time. "You don't have a portfolio?" "No, sir," I said. "Not yet. All I have are the ideas in that book." He closed the sketchbook and slid it back to me. He looked over at Jasper, who was now smiling, a small, knowing smile that reached his eyes. "All right, Reinhardt," Mr. Davis said. "I'm intrigued. Send me a formal proposal." He stood up, shook my hand, a firm, proper handshake this time, and left the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I felt like I was going to collapse. Jasper walked over to the table. "You passed," he said simply. "I almost blew it," I breathed, sinking into a chair. "You almost tried to be someone you're not," he corrected gently. "The moment you became yourself, you had him." He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket and a pen. He wrote quickly, tore out the check, and slid it across the table to me. It was made out to me, Sorrel Baxter. The amount was $10,000. I stared at it, speechless. "Seed money," he said. "For the website, the software, the business license, for S Hollow Studio. But there's one rule. Every single dollar must be accounted for. I want a spreadsheet. I'm not just investing in your talent, Sorrel. I'm investing in your ability to build a business. Now go get to work." The $10,000 from Jasper felt like a sacred trust. I opened a separate bank account, bought a ledger, and treated every single penny like it was my last. The first thing I did was buy a refurbished laptop and a subscription to the full suite of design software. Then came the real work. My life became a relentless cycle of learning and doing, fueled by cheap coffee and a terrifying fear of failure. My days were for research. I consumed everything I could about interior design, business management, and marketing. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials, teaching myself Photoshop, InDesign, and project management software. I learned about color theory, spatial planning, and lighting design, not from a textbook, but from blogs written by architects and designers I admired. My nights were for creation. With the software I was slowly mastering, I began to create. I built mock-ups of fictional hotel lobbies, of trendy cafes, of serene living rooms. I poured every idea I'd ever had onto the digital page, building a portfolio from scratch. I spent $1,000 on a clean, professional website template and spent a week customizing it, teaching myself basic code to make it perfect. I called my nascent company Hollow Stitch Studio, a nod to the intricate, empty space patterns I loved to draw. The website had no pictures of me. It was just the work, clean, elegant, and anonymous. Then came the hardest part, finding clients. Jasper's introduction had been a test, not a golden ticket. I had to find my own way. I made a list of every new business I could find in a 50-mile radius: cafes, boutiques, dentists' offices, yoga studios. I drafted a cold pitch email, personalizing each one. I sent out 50 emails a week. For the first 2 weeks, I got nothing but silence. The familiar sting of rejection began to creep back in. But then, on a Wednesday morning, I got a reply. It was from the owner of a small, struggling coffee shop downtown. His email was short. "Your work looks interesting. My budget is tiny. What can you do for $200? $200. After the cost of materials, it would be less than minimum wage for the hours I'd put in. But it was a yes, it was a real client. I wrote back immediately, accepting the job. I met the owner, a tired-looking man named Frank, and we talked for an hour. He wanted his shop to feel cozier, more like a second home for his regulars. I sketched out a plan on a napkin, just like I had at the open house: a new paint color, some inexpensive but dramatic pendant lights, and a mural I would paint myself. I did the work myself over a single weekend, painting until my back ached and my hands were splattered with a warm, earthy green. When Frank saw it on Monday morning, his tired eyes lit up. He handed me 2 $100 bills, and I held them in my hand, my first ever earned money as a designer. I went back to my car and cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming, bone-deep joy. That $200 job became a picture on my website's portfolio. It led to another email, this time from a woman who rented out a luxury Airbnb. She wanted to stage it better. The pay was $1,000. I used that money to hire a professional photographer to take pictures of both the coffee shop and the Airbnb. My portfolio was growing. It looked real. A local restaurant owner saw the Airbnb photos and hired me to redesign his patio space for $5,000. With that money, I was finally able to move out of my parents' basement and into a tiny shoebox apartment of my own. I didn't tell them I was leaving until the day I moved. My mother was offended. "After we let you live here for free?" she'd said, conveniently forgetting the rent I paid in endless chores and emotional damage. "It was never free," I said, and left it at that. Living alone was a revelation. I could work until 3 in the morning without anyone making a snide comment. I could cover my walls with inspiration boards and fabric swatches. My tiny apartment became the headquarters of Hollow Stitch Studio. But back at the family home, during the obligatory Sunday dinners I still forced myself to attend, the narrative hadn't changed. "So you're living in that tiny apartment now?" Perrin would ask, a look of faux concern on her face. "Is the art thing paying the bills, or are you just racking up debt?" "I'm managing," I'd say, keeping my voice even. My father would shake his head. "I just worry, Sorrel. Living like a broke artist. It's not a stable life." They had no idea. They had no idea about the late nights, the growing client list, the slowly accumulating balance in my business account. They still saw the girl in the basement with the useless degree. And I let them. Their blindness became my shield. It allowed me to build my world, brick by painful brick, in peace. The call came from a name I hadn't heard since high school: Mark Renshaw. He had been the kind of popular kid who built his status by tearing others down, and I had often been a convenient target for his jokes about my weird art projects. His voice on the phone was slick with a false friendliness that immediately put my guard up. "Sarl Baxter. Wow, blast from the past, right?" he began, not waiting for an answer. "Listen, I saw your design website. Looks super pro. Congrats on that. I've got my own thing going now, an online furniture brand, Renshaw Home. We're doing great, but we need to juice our online presence." I stayed quiet, letting him talk. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. "Here's the deal," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "I need reviews, lots of them, glowing ones, and I need some online articles, blog posts, talking up our new line. The thing is, the line isn't exactly out yet, but we need the buzz now." "You want me to write fake reviews and articles for a product that doesn't exist?" I asked, my voice flat. "Hey, don't say fake," he chuckled, as if it were a dirty word. "Say preemptive marketing. It's how the game is played, Sorrel. Everyone does it, And I'll make it worth your while. I'll pay you $5,000, half up front. For what, a few days' work? It's easy money. $5,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering with temptation. At that point, my business was surviving, but just barely. I was living on ramen, and the sheer will to succeed. $5,000 would be a lifeline. It would mean I could upgrade my ancient laptop, pay my rent for 3 months in advance, and maybe even stop worrying for 5 consecutive minutes. I could picture the number in my bank account, the relief, the freedom from the constant grinding stress of just scraping by. Mark was right. It was easy money. I thought about the stack of bills on my tiny kitchen counter. I thought about the instant ramen I'd had for dinner the last 3 nights. I was so tempted to say yes. Who would even know? It was just words on the internet. In a world of smoke and mirrors, what was one more puff of smoke? But then I thought of Jasper. I thought of him handing me that first check, his words echoing in my mind. I'm not just investing in your talent, Sorrel. I'm investing in your ability to build a business. A business built on lies wasn't a business. It was a house of cards, ready to collapse at the first gust of wind. I thought of the pride I felt after finishing the coffee shop, the joy of earning that first $200 honestly. It was a feeling 5,000 dirty dollars could never buy. No, Mark, I said, my voice firm. I can't do that. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What? Are you crazy? It's 5 grand. My business is built on trust with my clients, I said, the words feeling truer as I spoke them. My name, my studio's name, is all I have. It's not for sale. He scoffed, a nasty, dismissive sound. Wow, okay, still the same weird artsy Sorrel, huh? Always taking the high road to nowhere. Have fun being a broke artist forever. Your loss. He hung up. My hand was shaking as I put the phone down. My heart was pounding. Had I just made a huge mistake? The $5,000 felt like a ghost, haunting my tiny apartment. A few days later, I was having my weekly check-in call with Jasper, going over my spreadsheets. On a whim, I told him about Mark's offer and my refusal. I expected him to just nod and move on. Instead, he was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a quiet, deep approval that was worth more than any amount of money. You did the right thing, Sorrel, he said. Integrity is the only currency that appreciates over time. Many people learn that lesson far too late. I'm proud of you. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a validation so profound it almost brought tears to my eyes. But he wasn't finished. As it happens, he continued, I had lunch yesterday with an old friend, a silent partner in a new hotel development group. He was complaining that he can't find designers with fresh ideas and a strong moral compass. He's tired of the same old corporate nonsense. Jasper paused. I mentioned a promising young studio I knew. He wants to meet you. Be warned, he's meticulous, and he values honesty above all else. I think you two will get along. That meeting led to my first 6-figure contract, a project to design the interiors for a chain of 3 new boutique hotels. It was a game changer. It was the moment Hollow Stitch Studio went from a struggling startup to a serious contender, and it never would have happened if I had taken the easy money. That moral fork in the road hadn't just tested my character, it had paved the way for my future. The family gathering was for my father's birthday, a stuffy affair at the country club. I was seated at the far end of the table, as usual, next to a distant uncle who only wanted to talk about golf. I was mostly trying to stay invisible, nodding and smiling while my mind was a million miles away, mapping out the lighting schematics for the hotel project. My cousin Delaney, of course, was holding court. She was telling a story about a brilliant legal maneuver she'd pulled off at her firm, and my parents were hanging on her every word. In a lull in the conversation, she pulled out her phone. I'm just so bored with all the usual design blogs, she announced to the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's all the same beige and white minimalism. I've been trying to find some fresh inspiration for my new apartment. My blood ran cold. I had a terrible feeling I knew where this was going. I had started an anonymous Instagram account for Hollow Stitch Studio. It was a curated feed of my work, detailed shots of textures, behind-the-scenes sketches, and the finished, polished portfolio photos. It never showed my face or mentioned my name, but it was gaining a quiet, steady following within the design community. It was my secret garden, a place where the work could speak for itself. Delaney tapped on her screen. "Oh, look at this," she said, angling her phone so my mother and sister could see. "I found this incredible, obscure little account. It's called Hollow Stitch Studio. The work is just divine, so moody and atmospheric." I felt my stomach clench. Perrin and my mother leaned in, oohing and aahing. "Oh, that's beautiful," my mother said, so sophisticated. I wanted to scream, "That's me, that's my work," but the words were caught in my throat, tangled in years of being silenced. Delaney scrolled through, her thumb flicking past photos of the coffee shop, the Airbnb, the restaurant patio. "My wins, my hard work. I mean, look at this fabric combination," she said, her voice full of faux discovery. "I'm thinking of doing something just like this for my living room. I might even use some of these images as inspo for a presentation at work. We're pitching a hotel client and their branding is all about unique, curated experiences. This would be perfect." The casual, thoughtless theft of it all took my breath away. She wasn't just stealing it for her apartment. She was planning to use my intellectual property, my creative labor, in a professional pitch for her law firm's client. A client that I realized with a dawning horror was in the same luxury hospitality space I was now operating in. She was chasing the same whale. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, all the fight went out of me. It was one thing to be ignored by my family. It was another to be plagiarized by them. It felt so deeply, personally violating, that my first instinct was just to give up, to shut down the account, abandon the name, and retreat back into the shadows. What was the point of creating anything if it could just be snatched away so easily by someone with more confidence and less integrity? I excused myself from the table, my hands trembling, and went to the ladies' room. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked pale and defeated. The old Sorrel, the one who lived in the basement, would have let this happen. She would have cried and accepted it as her fate. But I wasn't her anymore. Anger, cold and clear, washed over me, chasing away the despair. This wasn't just an insult. It was a business threat, and I had to treat it as such. I went back to my apartment that night and didn't sleep. I documented everything. I took screenshots of my Instagram feed, with the dates of each post clearly visible. I gathered the original design files, the contracts with my clients, the metadata on my photographs. I compiled a mountain of evidence that proved, beyond any doubt, that I was the creator of the work. Then, instead of confronting Delaney directly, I took a different route. I had learned from Jasper that the most effective moves were often the quietest. I did some research and found out the name of the hotel brand her firm was pitching. The next morning, I sent a polite, professional email to their head of development, introducing Hollow Stitch Studio and my portfolio. And, as a preventative measure, I had a lawyer draft and send a formal cease and desist letter to Delaney's firm, citing copyright infringement of my online creative assets. It was a small legal bomb, dropped silently and precisely. A week later, I heard through the family grapevine that Delaney's pitch had been a disaster. The client had recognized the inspo from the website of a designer they were already in talks with me. Delaney had been humiliated, her credibility shattered in front of her bosses. I told Jasper what had happened, my voice still shaking a little with the audacity of it all. He listened patiently. "Good," he said when I was finished. "Let this be a lesson, Sorrel. Don't be afraid when your enemies come for you. They have just done you a tremendous favor. They've proven that you're worth stealing from. They've validated your work more than any compliment ever could. Now they know you're a player in the game, and they know you're not afraid to fight back." The incident with Delaney was a turning point. It forced me to shed the last remnants of my old, timid self. The name Hollow Stitch Studio felt tainted now, connected to a moment of violation. It was time for a change. I officially rebranded. I dissolved the old company name and formed a new one, Sess Hollow. The S was for Sorrel, but the missing family name was a deliberate, symbolic choice. I was no longer Sorrel Baxter. the family failure. I was hollow, a name that belonged only to me and the empire I was building. The six-figure hotel contract gave me the capital and the confidence to expand. I couldn't do it all myself anymore. I hired my first two freelancers, a brilliant architectural drafting student from Germany and a pragmatic project manager from Chicago. We communicated through video calls and project management software. My tiny apartment was officially too small. I rented a sleek private suite in a high-end co-working building downtown. It had glass walls, a shared reception, and a coffee bar that served oat milk lattes. Walking into it for the first time felt like stepping into a new life. It was real, it was professional. The success of the first 3 hotels created a ripple effect. My anonymous, powerful designs became my calling card. Word of mouth in the exclusive world of luxury development is faster than any marketing campaign. My client list grew, and so did my team. 2 freelancers became 5. 5 became a full-time staff of 10, including 2 senior designers I hired away from a major firm in New York. Hollow was no longer just me, it was a collective of talent under my direction. Our portfolio expanded beyond hotels. We were hired by a high-fashion boutique on the Avenue Montaigne in Paris to design their flagship store. The client meetings were held over video calls at 4 in the morning my time, but I didn't care. I was designing a space in Paris. We were contracted by a chain of exclusive wellness spas in California to create interiors that felt both luxurious and organic. My work, my vision, was being brought to life in 5 different countries. My personal life changed just as dramatically, though no one in my old life knew it. The profits from the business were substantial. After consulting with a financial advisor Jasper recommended, I made an investment. I bought a penthouse apartment in the newest, most prestigious residential building in the city. It was a secret I kept close to my chest. My family still believed I was living in a tiny, rented shoebox, struggling to make ends meet. The penthouse was my sanctuary. It had floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the skyline. It was my fortress of solitude, a testament to what I had built. I filled it with my own art. The walls were covered in the very textile designs my mother had once called childish and a waste of time. They were framed like the masterpieces they were, a silent rebuttal to every criticism I had ever endured. I hired a driver, Theo. It wasn't an indulgence, it was a necessity. I was working 16-hour days, flying to meet clients, and managing a growing international team. The time I saved by not having to drive or find parking was invaluable. Theo was a quiet, discreet man who saw everything and said nothing. He became a silent ally in my secret life. One afternoon, I received a call from Jasper. His voice was warm, but had a note of finality to it. "Sorrel," he said, "I'm retiring. I'm moving to my villa in Tuscany to paint and drink good wine. It's time." "Oh, Jasper," I said, a pang of sadness hitting me. "The industry won't be the same without you." "Nonsense," he chuckled. "It will be better. It will have people like you in it." He paused. "I'm restructuring my assets. I've spent my life building a certain standard of quality and integrity in this business. I don't want that to die with me. I've created a legacy fund, an investment vehicle to support new designers who share that vision. And I'm naming you as the head of the board. You will be the one to find the next generation of talent." I was speechless. He wasn't just my mentor anymore. He was passing the torch. He was entrusting me with his life's work. The girl who used to sketch on napkins in a corner, the girl who lived in a basement, was now the guardian of a legend's legacy. My empire was no longer hidden. It was about to have a very public face. And the timing, I would soon realize, was perfect. The email invitation arrived on a crisp December morning. It was from my mother. The subject line read, "Christmas Eve dinner." The tone was aggressively cheerful. "Dearest family," it began, "we are so thrilled to be hosting our annual Christmas Eve dinner, and we have a very special reason to celebrate this year. Our brilliant Delaney has been made a partner at her firm, and we want to toast her incredible success. Please RSVP at your earliest convenience." My name was included in the group email. A clear afterthought. It was an invitation born of obligation, a box to be ticked on the list of family duties. I knew exactly what it meant. The spotlight would be firmly on Delaney, the prodigal success story. I would be the background scenery, the walking, talking embodiment of the road not taken. I RSVP'd with a simple, "I'll be there." A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was breezy, casual, but I could hear the carefully constructed nonchalance. "Sorrel, darling, just a quick heads up," she said. "Delaney is staying with us for a few weeks, and we've given her your old room. It's just so much bigger and has the better desk for her work, you know how it is. We've put fresh sheets on the bed in the basement guest room for you. It'll be just like old times." It was said so easily, as if my comfort and my history in that house meant nothing. My old room, my sanctuary, was being given away to the very person who symbolized everything I was measured against and found wanting. The basement. They were, quite literally, putting me back in the basement. The humiliation was so precise, so perfectly aimed, it was almost artistic, but this time, it didn't sting, it clarified. I said nothing about my penthouse. I said nothing about my company, my staff, my international clients. I let them believe I was the same struggling artist they had always seen me as. My silence was a carefully laid trap. They had spent years underestimating me, and I was about to let their own assumptions be their downfall. The day before Christmas Eve, I went on a shopping trip, not to the discount stores they imagined I frequented, but to the most exclusive boutique in the city. I bought a dress of black silk that flowed like liquid night and a pair of heels studded with subtle gold. I bought a winter coat of the softest cashmere. It wasn't a costume anymore, it was my armor. The morning of the dinner, my phone rang. It was Jasper, calling from Tuscany. The connection was clear as a bell. "So," he said, his voice crinkling with amusement. "Tonight's the night." "Tonight's the night," I confirmed, looking out my penthouse window at the sprawling city below. "You have everything in place? The paperwork is all signed and ready?" "Mr. Caswell has the complete file. He'll be there at 7:30 sharp." "And Theo knows the plan?" "Theo knows." There was a pause, and I could picture him smiling, a glass of wine in his hand. "They're going to be so surprised, Sorrel." "I know," I said, a slow, confident smile spreading across my face. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards, who had spent 2 years patiently waiting for the right moment to play her hand. "Are you ready?" he asked. The same question he'd asked me before my first real pitch. I looked at my reflection in the vast window, the city lights twinkling behind me like a conquered kingdom. I wasn't the terrified girl in the borrowed blazer anymore. "Oh yes," I said, "I'm more than ready." I arrived at my family's home at precisely 7 o'clock. Theo pulled the Escalade smoothly into the circular driveway, its quiet, powerful presence a stark contrast to the other cars. Perrin's sensible sedan, my father's aging Lexus. He opened the door for me, and I stepped out into the cold night air. The house was blazing with lights, a perfect picture of holiday cheer. I walked up the stone path, the sound of my gold-studded heels clicking with a quiet authority. When I entered, the family was gathered in the living room, drinks in hand. A wave of silence fell as they turned to look at me. I could see the flicker of confusion in their eyes. They were expecting the old sorrel, the one in faded jeans and a hand-knitted sweater, the one who tried to make herself small. They were not expecting the woman standing before them, draped in black silk and quiet confidence. "Sorrel," my mother exclaimed, recovering first. "My goodness, you're very dressed up." Perrin looked me up and down, a faint sneer on her lips. "Who are you trying to impress?" she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. "Is that a rental?" my father asked, gesturing vaguely toward the driveway where Theo was waiting patiently. "Seems a bit much, don't you think?" I just smiled. "It gets me where I need to go," I said, my voice calm. I didn't offer any other explanation. I let their assumptions hang in the air, swirling around them like smoke. Delaney, looking smug in a designer dress of her own, gave me a dismissive glance. "Nice coat," she said, the compliment landing like an insult. "Finally treating yourself to something nice?" Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My mother, flustered by this deviation from her carefully planned evening, went to answer it. Standing on the doorstep was Jasper Reinhardt. He was holding a beautifully wrapped gift. "Jasper," my father said, his voice booming with false bonhomie. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were in town." "I'm just passing through," Jasper said smoothly, stepping inside and handing the gift to my mother. "I wanted to drop this off. It's a first edition of a book on Palladian architecture I thought you'd enjoy, Everett." My family fawned over him. He was a celebrity in their world, a symbol of the kind of success they worshipped. They had no idea he was there for me. As they were ushering Jasper into the living room, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was our longtime neighbor, Mrs. Carline, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s who had lived across the street since I was born. She held a plate of homemade cookies. "Marilyn," she said, "I just wanted to drop these off, and I saw all the cars. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Helen. Come in," my mother said, her hostess mode on full display. Mrs. Carline had always been a quiet observer, a silent witness to years of backyard dramas and holiday tensions. Her presence felt significant, like a neutral party being called to the stand. The final piece of the puzzle arrived at exactly 7:30. The doorbell rang a third time. My mother opened it to find a man in a severe dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Good evening," he said, his voice dry and professional. "My name is Mr. Casewell. I'm here for a 7:30 appointment with the Baxter family." My father stepped forward, confused. "Appointment? I think there's been a mistake. We're having a Christmas Eve dinner." "There is no mistake," Mr. Casewell said, stepping into the foyer. He looked around at the assembled group. My parents, Perrin and her husband Delaney, me, Jasper and Mrs. Carline. I am the executor of the estate of the late Thomas Baxter. I am here tonight, as per his final instructions, to conduct a reading of his last will and testament. Silence, a thick, shocked silence fell over the room. My grandfather, Thomas Baxter, my father's father, had passed away over 5 years ago. His will had been read, his assets distributed. It was done. "A will reading?" my mother stammered, her face pale. "But Thomas's estate was settled years ago." "Not entirely," Mr. Caswell said, his gaze sweeping over the confused faces. "It seems there was a secondary trust, a hidden estate, with very specific instructions that it was not to be unsealed until this exact date." He opened his briefcase. "If you would all please gather in the living room, we can begin." The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a tense, nervous energy. My family exchanged bewildered looks. Delaney looked annoyed, her celebration having been unceremoniously derailed. They all filed into the living room and took their seats, their eyes fixed on the lawyer. I remained standing by the fireplace, next to Jasper. He gave me a look that said, "Showtime." Mr. Caswell cleared his throat and pulled a thick, sealed envelope from his briefcase. "This document," he began, "is a letter and a final directive from Thomas Baxter to be read in the presence of his son Everett, his daughter-in-law Marilyn, his granddaughters Perrin and Sorrel, and his grandniece Delaney West." He paused, looking over his spectacles. He also stipulated that 2 witnesses be present, his friend Jasper Reinhardt and his neighbor Helen Carline. A murmur went through my family. Why would my grandfather include Jasper and Mrs. Carline in his will? Mr. Caswell broke the seal and began to read. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was terrifyingly clear. My grandfather, a shrewd and quiet man who had always seen more than he let on, had secretly set up a trust years ago. He had been quietly buying assets, making investments, and building a second, hidden fortune. "The primary asset of this trust," Mr. Casewell read, his voice dispassionate, "is the full, unencumbered deed to the property at 14 Willow Creek Lane." He looked up. "This house." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father looked as if he'd been struck. They had lived in this house for 30 years, but they had never owned it outright. They had been living under a mortgage, a fact they kept hidden beneath their veneer of wealth. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "the trust contains a majority shareholding, 60% to be exact, in a privately held design and architecture firm. He consulted his notes. A firm currently valued at approximately $15 million, known as S. Hollow. Delaney's head snapped up. Her face, which had been a mask of bored arrogance, was suddenly drained of all color. Her mouth fell open. I could see the frantic calculations happening behind her eyes as she connected the dots, the name of the company her firm had been trying to acquire, the company whose inspo she had tried to steal. Mr. Caswell delivered the final devastating blow. As per the final and irrevocable instructions of Thomas Baxter, the sole executor and beneficiary of this entire trust, including the deed to this house and all shares in the S. Hollow Company, is his granddaughter. He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes finding me where I stood by the fire, Sorrel Annalise Baxter. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a dense, heavy thing, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Every eye was on me. "You," Delaney finally choked out, pointing a trembling finger. Her face was a grotesque mask of shock and disbelief. She looked from me to the lawyer and back again, as if she couldn't comprehend the reality of what she had just heard. "You're what?" Perrin gasped, her voice a tiny strangled sound. The enabler, the one who had mocked my business cards, was staring at me as if I had sprouted wings. My mother and father were frozen, their faces slack with shock. They looked like statues, their festive cheer shattered into a million pieces. From the corner, Jasper simply nodded, a slow, deeply satisfied smile on his face. "Told you she'd surprise you," he said quietly to the silent room. I let the moment hang in the air, savoring the profound, seismic shift in power. I had imagined this moment for 2 years. I had played it over and over in my mind, but the reality was more potent than I ever could have dreamed. I finally pushed myself off the mantel, my movements calm and deliberate, and took a step forward. I looked directly at my mother, then at Delaney, my gaze sweeping over their stunned faces. "You gave away my bedroom," I said, my voice not loud, but carrying to every corner of the silent room. It was clear, cold, and final. "So I bought the house." The silence that followed my statement was shattered by a flurry of frantic, panicked noise. It was as if a spell had been broken, and the entire room erupted in chaos. "This is a mistake," Delaney shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her lawyerly composure was gone, replaced by a raw, sputtering fury. "There has to be a legal misunderstanding. A clerical error. Grandfather Thomas would never you." She whirled on me, her eyes wild. "This is some kind of trick. What did you do?" My mother, Marilyn, found her voice, and it was laced with the familiar cadence of shame and accusation she had always used on me. "Sorrel, how could you be so secretive? To go behind our backs like this? To scheme? It's manipulative. It's cruel," she accused, her voice rising with hysteria. She was trying to paint me as the villain, to wrestle back some semblance of moral high ground. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. I felt nothing but a distant clinical calm. The power of her words, which had once been able to reduce me to tears, was gone. "You asked me to be invisible," I said, my voice even and steady. "For years, you told me to be quiet, to stay out of the way, to not make a scene. I listened. I became so invisible, you never even saw me." My father Everett, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally spoke. He wouldn't meet my eye. He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Sorrel, I'm sorry," he muttered. The apology was weak, pathetic, and 20 years too late. It was an apology not for how he had treated me, but for the fact that he had backed the wrong horse. I didn't even grant him the dignity of a response. I simply turned my back on him, on all of them. My part in this drama was over. I had delivered my lines, and now it was time to exit the stage. I walked towards the foyer, my steps unhurried. Jasper caught my eye and gave me a proud paternal wink. As I reached the front door, my family was still scrambling, their voices a cacophony of denial and blame. I could hear Perrin trying to comfort Delaney, my mother starting to weep, my father just sitting, a broken man. I opened the door and stepped out into the crisp, clean night air. It felt like walking out of a prison. Theo was waiting by the escalade, the door already open for me. As I was about to get in, a quiet voice called my name, Sorrel. I turned. It was Mrs. Carline, who had slipped out of the house unnoticed amidst the chaos. She stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, a small, knowing smile on her face. She had watched me grow up from her window across the street. She had seen me practicing cartwheels on the lawn as a girl, and she had seen me trudging home from school with my oversized art portfolio. She had seen everything. "You've always had the light in you, dear," she said, her voice soft but clear. "They just never bothered to look." Tears pricked my eyes, the first real emotion I had felt all night. It was a simple statement, but it was a validation that meant more to me than owning any house or company. Someone had seen me. Someone had known all along. "Thank you, Mrs. Carline," I whispered. I slid into the plush leather seat of the car. Theo closed the door, shutting out the sound of the imploding Baxter family for good. As we pulled away from the curb, I took one last look at the house. My house. It was just a building of wood and stone. It had never been a home. Home was not a place you had to fight to be seen in. Home was a place you built for yourself. As the Escalade turned the corner, I didn't look back. I am sitting by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. The city sprawls out before me, a glittering tapestry of light and life. The chaos of Christmas Eve feels like a distant memory, a scene from a movie I once watched. Up here, there is only peace. The walls of my living room are not beige. They are a deep, calming sapphire blue, and they are covered in my art. My intricate textile pieces, the ones born from late nights and quiet determination, are stretched onto large canvases and hung like museum installations. The watercolor patterns that my mother once dismissed as childish scribbles are framed in elegant gold, catching the soft light from the custom fixtures I designed myself. This space is a living, breathing testament to the fact that she was wrong. My art wasn't childish. It was the foundation of my future. My phone buzzes on the marble coffee table. It's a notification from my project management app. The plans for our first S-Hollow showroom have just been finalized by my team. It's set to open in Soho in 3 months. My company, which started as a desperate dream in a damp basement, now has over 25 employees. We have a legal team, an accounting department, and a waiting list of clients that includes some of the most respected brands in the world. I am the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire that I built with my own 2 hands, in silence and obscurity. I think back to the girl who cried over a handful of handmade business cards. The girl who was so desperate for a scrap of approval from people who were incapable of giving it. I wish I could go back and tell her that her worth was never up for their debate. It was a fact, waiting for her to claim it. The journey was long and lonely, and there were so many times I almost gave up. There were so many moments I believed their version of me, the failure, the disappointment, the broke artist. But a seed of defiance, planted in the darkness of that basement, had taken root. It was nurtured by Jasper's belief, hardened by Delaney's sabotage, and strengthened by every small, honest win. I didn't set out for revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. What I wanted was simpler, and far more powerful: justice. I wanted the reality of who I was to be undeniable. I wanted to build a life so full, so successful, and so authentically mine that their opinions would become utterly irrelevant. Looking out at the endless city lights, I realize I've achieved that. Their anger and shock don't touch me up here. Their world seems so small now, a tiny self-contained drama playing out on a stage I no longer have any interest in. I don't need to see them lose to know that I have won. My victory isn't in their defeat, it's in the quiet hum of my own well-earned peace. It's in the knowledge that tomorrow morning I will wake up in a home I created, and I will go to work at a company I built, surrounded by art that I love. I used to think I needed their approval to feel whole. I spent so many years contorting myself into different shapes, trying to be the daughter, the sister, the cousin they wanted me to be, hoping that one day they would finally see me. But the great liberating truth is that I never needed their approval at all. I only needed my own permission. Permission to be different, permission to follow my own strange artistic path, permission to fail, to learn, and to build myself back up, stronger than before, permission to be me. Sometimes the people closest to you are blind to your worth, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family and proved them wrong? Let me know in the comments. And if you felt this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Keep building in silence. Your moment is coming.